In the year 1281, the largest invasion fleet the world had ever seen descended upon Japan. 4,000 ships carrying over 140,000 Mongol warriors, a naval force that dwarfed the Spanish Armada and made the D-Day landings look small. They were led by Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, a ruler who had never known defeat. The Japanese samurai, hopelessly outnumbered, fought with desperate courage, but they were being pushed back to the brink of annihilation. An entire nation held its breath, praying for a miracle, and then the sky turned black. The sea began to boil. A wind of impossible force tore through the Mongol fleet, a typhoon so violent it was described as a hurricane from hell. It splintered masts, shredded sails, and smashed ships against each other until the entire bay was a graveyard of wood and men. When the storm finally passed, the invincible Mongol army was gone, swallowed by the sea. The Japanese called this storm the kamikaze, the divine wind. But this was no gentle act of a benevolent god. This was the work of two of the most terrifying, violent, and demonic deities in all of mythology. They were not prayed to out of love, they were prayed to out of fear. And the most disturbing part? They were born from the rotting, maggot-eaten corpse of a dead goddess, in the heart of the Japanese underworld. How did two such monstrous beings, born from decay and darkness, become the divine saviors of an entire nation? To understand the storm, you must first understand the darkness that created it. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a spear. In a time before time, when the heavens and the earth were a chaotic, oily soup, two divine beings descended from the heavens. They were Izanagi, the he who invites, and his sister wife Izanami, the she who invites. Standing on the floating bridge of heaven, they plunged a single jewel-encrusted spear into the churning chaos below. They stirred and stirred, and as they lifted the spear, the brine that dripped from its tip coagulated, forming the first island on Agoro, the first solid ground in a formless universe. Here they built a palace and performed a marriage ritual, circling a heavenly pillar to consecrate their union. From this divine pairing, the islands of Japan were born one by one. They birthed the god of the sea, the god of the mountains, the god of the trees, and the wind. They were the architects of a new world, shaping a paradise from primordial chaos. Their love was the engine of creation, a force that populated the empty world with life and landscape. For a time it seemed their work would be an endless act of beauty and order, but creation is a violent act, and the birth of their final child would not just end their idyllic union. It would shatter the barrier between life and death, and unleash horrors upon the world they had so lovingly built. The birth was a catastrophe. Izanami's final child was Kagutsuchi, the incarnation of fire. As he was born, his very essence, a being of pure, uncontrollable flame, scorched and burned his mother from the inside out. Her divine body was consumed by her own creation. Izanagi, watching in horror, could do nothing as his beloved wife, the mother of his world, died in agony. His grief was not silent. It was a cataclysm. In a fit of world-altering rage, he drew his 10-span sword and decapitated his newborn son, the fire god Kagutsuchi. The blood that sprayed from the infant god's body gave birth to yet more deities, gods of rock, gods of war, and even a dragon god. But none of this could quell the emptiness that now consumed him. The world he had created with Izanami felt hollow, a silent monument to his loss. He could not accept a world without her, and so, driven by a love that defied the laws of nature, Izanagi made a fateful decision. He would do what no being mortal or divine was ever meant to do. He would journey to the land of the dead to bring her back. He traveled to the edge of the living world and found the dark passage that led to Yomi no Kuni, the shadowy land of the dead. It was a place of eternal twilight, a silent, grim reflection of the world above. There were no birds, no wind, no life, only the oppressive stillness of eternity. He called out her name, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness. And from the deepest shadows of a palace she answered. Izanami's voice was the same, but it carried a new hollow weight. She came to the gate, a figure shrouded in darkness, and Izanagi poured out his heart. He begged her to return, telling her that the world they had started to build was not yet finished. He needed her. Izanami, touched by his devotion, agreed that she wished to return, but she had already eaten the food of the underworld. The price of consuming the sustenance of Yomi was to become a permanent resident. She told him she would have to ask the gods of Yomi for permission to leave, but she made him swear a solemn oath. He must not, under any circumstances, look at her. He must wait patiently in the darkness, and not try to see her true form. Blinded by love and desperation, Izanagi agreed. He promised he would not look. He waited, and waited. The silence of the underworld stretched for what felt like an eternity. The stillness began to gnaw at him. Why was it taking so long? What was she hiding? His patience frayed, his promise forgotten, replaced by a desperate need to see the face of the woman he loved one more time. He broke off a tooth from the sacred comb in his hair, and with a flick of his will, ignited it. The tiny flame pierced the absolute darkness of the underworld palace, and he saw. What he saw would haunt him for eternity. It was not his wife, not the radiant goddess of creation he remembered. Before him was a thing of pure horror. Izanami's body was a rotting, putrefying corpse, crawling with maggots that squirmed in and out of her decaying flesh. Her beautiful form had sloughed off, revealing the grotesque reality of death. And in this moment of ultimate terror, Izanagi saw something else. From this festering, decomposing body, new life was squirming into existence. 8 grotesque beings were being born from her decay, the thunder deities, the Raijin. They were creatures of rot and rage, their forms crackling with the dark energy of the underworld. As his torch flickered, illuminating the nightmare, Izanami's voice shrieked through the darkness, no longer a lover's whisper, but a cry of pure rage and humiliation. "You have shamed me!" she screamed, her voice echoing with the fury of a betrayed god. The rotting corpse lunged. The 8 newborn thunder demons, with their father's terrified face as their first sight, joined their mother in a furious pursuit. Izanagi turned and fled, the screams of his dead wife and the thunderous footsteps of his monstrous, newly born children chasing him out of the land of the dead. He was no longer a grieving husband seeking his lost love. He was a creator, fleeing the monstrous, unintended consequences of his own creation. He scrambled out of the cavern's mouth, the foul air of Yomi clinging to him like a shroud, the shrieks of the Shikome, the hags of the underworld, echoing just behind. He was defiled, tainted by the land of the dead, by the sight of his beloved's decay. But there was no time for grief, only for survival. He grabbed the first thing he could find. A massive boulder, a rock so large it was said 1,000 men couldn't move it. With a final desperate surge of divine strength, he rolled it into place, sealing the passage between the living and the dead forever. From the other side, he heard her voice, no longer the sweet melody he remembered, but a guttural, furious roar. Izanami, the queen of the underworld, cursed him. "My dearest husband," she seethed, her voice muffled by the stone. "Because you have done this, I will take 1,000 lives from your land of the living each day." Izanagi, breathing heavily, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, shouted back, his voice filled with a sorrow that was quickly hardening into resolve. "Then, my dearest wife," he declared, "I will ensure that 1,500 lives are born each day." And in that moment the eternal cycle was set. A cosmic balance of life and death, born from a broken heart and a sealed tomb. This is why death is a part of our world. It is the fulfillment of a bitter promise made at the dawn of time. But Izanagi's ordeal was far from over. He was free, but he was unclean. The stench of death, the filth of Yomi, was a stain not just on his clothes, but on his very soul. He needed to be purified. He journeyed to a river mouth at Tachibana, a place of clean, flowing water, and began a ritual of cleansing, a misogi. This wasn't just a bath. This was an act of cosmic renewal. As he cast off his staff, a new god sprang into being. As he threw aside his belt, another emerged. His clothes, his bracelets, each item he discarded, still thick with the grime of the underworld, birthed another kami, another deity. 12 gods were born from the things he carried, each one a testament to the journey he had endured and the pollution he was shedding. But the most profound creations were yet to come. He stepped into the river, the cool water a shocking relief against his skin. He washed away the filth of Yomi, and as the dark residue swirled away downstream, more gods were born from the pollution itself, deities of misfortune and disaster, the lingering echoes of his trauma. But he continued, washing deeper, seeking a purity that was absolute. And then came the miracle. He lowered his head into the pristine water and washed his left eye. As the water dripped from his lashes, it didn't fall as mere water. It coalesced into a being of radiant, blinding light. She was brilliant, magnificent, a goddess who shone with the warmth and glory of the morning sun. This was Amaterasu Amikami, the great goddess of the sun. Izanagi looked upon her and was filled with a joy he thought he had lost forever. He gave her his sacred necklace and tasked her with ruling the heavens, the Takuma no Hara. Next he washed his right eye. From this act another deity emerged, this one bathed in a soft ethereal silver light. He was serene, majestic, the perfect counterpart to his sister's fiery brilliance. This was Tsukuyumi no Mikoto, the god of the moon and the night. Izanagi gave him the domain of the night, to rule alongside his sister in a perfect celestial balance. Finally, Izanagi washed his nose, and from this a third child was born. But this one was different. He wasn't born of serene light or radiant warmth. He was born with a roar. He was powerful, violent, and utterly unpredictable. His beard was vast, his presence overwhelming, and his voice was the sound of a coming tempest. This was Takaya Susanoo no Mikoto, the valiant, swift, and impetuous god of the sea and storms. These three, Amaterasu, Tsukuyumi, and Susanoo, were the Mahashira no Yuzu no Miko, the three precious children, the most important of all his offspring. They were born not of union, but of purification. Born from a father's attempt to wash away the memory of death. Izanagi, his great work of creation seemingly complete, gave his final commands. Amaterasu would rule the heavens. Tsukuyumi would rule the night. And to his tempestuous son, Susanoo, he gave dominion over the vast, churning seas. But Susanoo was not like his siblings. He was not content with his domain. He did not bow his head and accept his father's decree. Instead of tending to the oceans, he wept. He wailed and screamed and raged. His cries were not the cries of a sad child, but the howls of a hurricane. His sorrow was so immense that it withered the green mountains, dried up the rivers, and brought forth evil spirits across the land. The world, newly born and fragile, began to suffer under the weight of his divine tantrum. Izanagi, his patience worn thin, confronted his son. "Why do you neglect your kingdom and cry like this?" he demanded. And Susanoo, his voice thick with thunder, replied, "I weep because I do not wish to rule the seas. I wish to be with my mother Izanami, in her land of Yomi." Izanagi was stunned, then enraged. The very place he had just escaped, the land of rot and horror that had cost him everything, was the one place his son longed to go. This was not just disobedience, it was a profound betrayal. It was a rejection of the world of light and life he had fought so hard to protect. In his fury, Izanagi banished Susanoo. He exiled him from the celestial plains, casting him out. But you cannot simply banish a storm. You can only change its course. Before departing for the underworld, Susanoo had one last thing to do. He wanted to say goodbye to his sister, Amaterasu, in her heavenly kingdom. But he didn't ascend quietly. He ascended with a tremor that shook the very foundations of the earth. The mountains trembled, the rivers roared. His approach was not that of a brother coming to say farewell. It was the approach of an invading army, the arrival of a natural disaster. Amaterasu saw him coming. She saw the chaos he brought with him, and she did not trust his intentions. Why would the god of storms, banished for his destructive grief, come to her serene kingdom of light? She prepared for war. She tied up her hair, wrapped her bow, and armed herself with a sword, stamping her feet on the ground with a force that made the heavens rumble. She stood, a warrior goddess of the sun, ready to defend her realm from the encroaching darkness of her own brother. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter the heavens, plunge the world into darkness, and unleash a torrent of new gods and monsters. It was the first great conflict of the divine age, a battle between the sun and the storm. And it's in the DNA of that storm, in the untamable, violent, and chaotic spirit of Susanoo, that we find the primal essence of the forces that would one day be commanded by two other beings. Two demons, or perhaps gods, born of chaos itself. The seeds of thunder and wind were being sown in this celestial feud, waiting for the right moment to burst forth and take on a form, and a name all their own. To understand their violent birth, you must first understand a god's heartbreak. You have to journey to a place of utter darkness, a land of rot and shadow called Yomi, the Japanese underworld. This was the kingdom of Izanami, the primordial mother goddess who had, alongside her husband Izanagi, given birth to the very islands of Japan and a host of other deities. But creation is a costly, dangerous business. In giving birth to the fire god Kagetsuchi, Izanami was burned so severely that she died. Consumed by a grief that could shatter mountains, Izanagi traveled to the gates of Yomi to bring her back. He begged her to return with him to the land of the living, the world of light they had so painstakingly built together. Izanami, shrouded in the gloom of her new home, agreed. But she had one condition. She had already eaten the food of the underworld, and this bound her to it. She would try to ask the gods of Yomi for an exception, but while she did, Izanagi must promise not to look at her. Under no circumstances could he gaze upon her form. Izanagi agreed. He waited and waited, as the silence and the oppressive dark of Yomi pressed in on him. Time stretched into an eternity. His patience, worn thin by sorrow and fear, finally snapped. He broke off a tooth from the sacred comb in his hair, lit it like a torch, and stepped further into the palace of shadows. He had to see his beloved wife. What he saw was not the beautiful goddess he remembered. The flickering light of his makeshift torch revealed a nightmare. He saw Izanami's body, now a rotting maggot-eaten corpse. Her flesh sloughed from her bones, and from her decaying form, 8 terrifying beings were crawling forth. The 8 thunder deities, embodiments of her decay and rage. She was no longer the mother of creation. She was the monstrous queen of the dead. Horrified, Izanagi screamed and turned to flee. But his cry of terror and the sudden light had alerted her. A shriek of pure, unadulterated fury echoed through the darkness. "You have shamed me," she bellowed, her voice a death rattle. He had broken his promise. He had seen her in her grotesque state, and for that, he would not leave Yomi alive. This is the moment. The celestial feud becomes a frantic, desperate chase. The primordial father of all things is running for his life from the primordial mother. Izanami unleashes the Shikome, the foul hags of the underworld, to capture him. Izanagi, thinking fast, throws his headdress behind him. It magically transforms into a bunch of grapes, and the hags, starving, stop to devour them. He flees onward. Next, he throws his sacred comb, the very one he lit to see his wife. It sprouts into a thicket of bamboo shoots, momentarily blocking the path of his pursuers. But Izanami's rage could not be stopped by such simple tricks. She was now desperate, and in this moment of ultimate divine fury, as she called upon the foulest spirits of her realm, 2 new entities were given form, birthed not from a womb, but from the very fabric of her wrath and the putrid air of the underworld. From the decaying matter of her head, a being of pure concussive force took shape. It was a monstrous, demonic figure with skin the color of a blood-red sunset. Its muscles coiled like knotted ropes, promising unimaginable strength. Its face was a mask of feral glee, with a wide mouth full of sharp fangs and eyes that crackled with untamed energy. Its hair stood on end, wild and chaotic, like a thunderhead about to burst. But most terrifying of all was the halo of drums that encircled it. 8 flat, taiko-style drums, connected by a ring of lightning. With a flick of its clawed hands, it could beat upon them, and with each strike, a deafening roar would shake the foundations of Yomi itself. This was the genesis of thunder. This was Raijin. And as Raijin was born of sound and fury, another entity was born from the foul, stagnant air of the underworld, stirred into a frenzy by the chase. This being was a whirlwind of motion, a creature with skin the color of a storm-sick sky, a sickly jade green. It looked just as demonic as its brother, but where Raijin was explosive power, this one was relentless, insidious force. It clutched a massive bag, a sack made of white cloth that seemed to bulge and writhe as if it contained a living storm. Its mouth was open in a wide, unsettling grin, as if the chaos of the chase was the greatest fun it had ever known. By simply loosening his grip on the bag, a gale-force wind would erupt, a foul, suffocating blast of underworld air capable of tearing souls from their spiritual anchors. This was the first hurricane, the first typhoon. This was Fujin. They were not gods, not yet. They were demons. Oni, born from a goddess's shame, decay, and rage. They were the ultimate weapons of a scorned queen. Immediately, they joined the hunt. Raijin beat his drums, and the resulting thunderclaps caused the very rock of Yomi to tremble and crack, trying to trap Izanagi in newly formed chasms. Fujin opened his bag, and the winds of the dead howled after the fleeing god, a chilling moan that promised an eternity of suffering. They were the perfect duo of destruction, one the sudden violent ear-splitting shockwave, the other the inescapable, ever-present, soul-stealing gale. They were chaos given form, nature's fury personified. They didn't think. They didn't reason. They simply were. They were the storm, and their mother's rage was their only directive. Izanagi barely escaped, sealing the entrance to Yomi with a massive boulder. He had survived, but he had unleashed something terrible. He had witnessed the birth of two forces that the world of the living was not prepared for. Raijin and Fujin were trapped in the underworld with their furious mother. But such primal power cannot be contained forever. They were not of the heavens. They were not born of light and order like the other gods, the Amatsukami who ruled from the high plane of heaven. They were chthonic beings born of death, darkness, and betrayal. And yet, if you look at a temple in Japan today, you might see their statues standing guard. If you look at ancient artwork, you will see them depicted not just as demons but as deities. So how did these two monsters of the underworld, these enforcers of a rotting goddess's vengeance, ascend from the depths of Yomi? How did they go from hunting a god through the land of the dead to standing among them? The answer lies in a conflict that would pit them against the most sacred and powerful figures in the entire Japanese pantheon. A battle that would determine the fate of heaven itself. Their escape from the underworld was not just a jailbreak. It was an invasion. The celestial gates of Takamagara, the high heavenly plane, were not meant to be breached. They were constructs of divine will, woven from light and order, meant to stand for eternity. But they weren't breached. They were annihilated. They vanished in a singular, deafening moment, not of metal twisting or stone crumbling, but of reality itself being torn open. Through the shimmering void stepped the invaders, and the serene, timeless hum of heaven was instantly replaced by a symphony of pandemonium. They were a terrifying sight, a visceral affront to the pristine beauty of the celestial realm. One was a being of raw, kinetic violence, his skin the color of fresh blood, muscles coiled like pythons under his demonic hide. Around his head, a halo of floating taiko drums pulsed with an unholy light. This was Raijin. He didn't walk, he stomped, and with every step, the sacred ground cracked. With a manic grin, he raised his bachi, his drumsticks, and brought them down on the smallest of his drums. It wasn't just a sound, it was a physical blow. A wave of concussive force, a crack of thunder so pure and so violent it shattered the crystalline trees and sent minor kami, divine spirits, scattering like leaves in a gale. And the gale was there, embodied in his brother. Fujin was a creature of emerald green, a monstrous form of sinew and malice. He carried no weapon, no armor. All he held was a large white bag cinched tight at the neck. It seemed to writhe and swell in his grasp, as if containing a living, breathing hurricane. His face was a mask of cruel glee. As Raijin's thunderclap echoed, Fujin loosened his grip on the bag. From its mouth a torrent of wind screamed forth. This was not the gentle breeze that rustled the heavenly bamboo groves. This was a razor wind, a gale that peeled golden tiles from the roofs of celestial palaces and tore the silk banners of the gods to shreds. The divine residents of Takamagara were paralyzed, not just by fear, but by sheer incomprehension. Their existence was one of order, of ritual, of predictable cycles. This was anarchy. This was an impossibility. Who were these Oni, these demons, who dared to bring the chaos of the underworld into the most sacred of spaces? The first to react were the celestial guards, the Shikigami, warriors forged from divine energy. They were formidable, their blades capable of cutting through mountains. They surged forward, a wave of disciplined light and righteous fury. They were met by a cackle. Raijin beat another drum, a deeper, more resonant boom this time. The air thickened, grew heavy with ozone, and a bolt of jagged, white-hot lightning, thicker than an ancient tree, leaped from the sky. It didn't just strike the first rank of guards, it vaporized them. Where a dozen divine warriors had stood, there was now only a crater of molten, glassy earth and the lingering smell of burnt divinity. Before the others could even process the loss, Fujin swept his bag of winds in a low arc. A horizontal tornado erupted, a focused blast of air that acted like a battering ram. It slammed into the remaining guards, not killing them, but sending them tumbling end over end, crashing through sacred torii gates and into ornamental lakes, their armor dented, their spirits broken, their weapons scattered. The two demons laughed, a sound like grinding stones and howling wind, and pushed deeper into heaven. They were not an army with a strategy, they were a natural disaster. Raijin would pound his drums in a gleeful, random rhythm, and with each beat, a new calamity was born. A bolt of lightning would incinerate a centuries-old pagoda. A deafening thunderclap would shatter the composure of the gods, sending them into a panic. Fujin, meanwhile, danced through the chaos he created, releasing targeted gusts of wind that toppled statues of the ancient deities, ripped sacred scrolls from their displays and sent them spiraling into the sky, and fanned the flames of Raijin's lightning strikes into raging infernos. The heavenly weaving hall, where the goddess Amaterasu's attendants wove the fabrics of fate, was unraveled by a sudden squall. The sacred stables where the celestial horses resided were blasted open, the divine beasts stampeding in terror. This was more than an attack, it was a defilement. Every act of destruction was an insult, a deliberate desecration of everything the gods held sacred. News of the invasion spread like wildfire. The greater gods, the architects of the Japanese pantheon, began to stir from their divine courts. Aim-no-Yuzum, the goddess of the dawn and revelry, saw her sacred stage, where she had once danced to lure the sun goddess from her cave, splintered by a stray thunderbolt. Omoikane, the god of wisdom and intelligence, whose mind held the knowledge of the universe, could not fathom a strategy to counter such raw, unpredictable power. How do you reason with a hurricane? How do you negotiate with a lightning strike? A council of the gods was hastily convened, but their debate was drowned out by the ever-approaching rhythm of Raijin's drums. Finally, a god known for his immense strength and martial prowess, Tawaraya, the god who had physically pulled Amaterasu from her cave, decided enough was enough. He was a being of pure physical might, his body carved from the very concept of power. He strode out onto the main thoroughfare of heaven, his path directly in the way of the two demonic brothers. "Cease this madness!" his voice boomed, a challenge that, for a moment, was even louder than the thunder. "You have defiled this sacred realm. Your rampage ends now." Raijin and Fujin stopped. They looked at this new challenger, this mountain of a god standing before them. They looked at each other, and they grinned. It was the predatory grin of wolves who had just been challenged by a sheep. Tawaraya braced himself, his feet sinking into the celestial ground, rooting himself to the very foundation of heaven. He was immovable, unbreakable. Fujin went first. He opened his bag wide, wider than ever before, and unleashed its full, concentrated fury. A jet stream of wind, a solid wall of air moving at impossible speeds, slammed into Tawaraya. The god of strength grunted, his muscles straining, his robes tearing away from his body. The ground behind him cracked and split under the strain, but he held. He was an anchor against the storm, a testament to the power of divine order. He roared in defiance, taking a single monumental step forward against the gale. But he had focused everything on the wind. He had forgotten the thunder. While Tawaraya was locked in a contest of strength with Fujin, Raijin floated directly above him, unseen, unheard amidst the screaming wind. With a look of ecstatic cruelty, Raijin raised his drumsticks high. He didn't strike one drum. He struck all of them, at the exact same time. The sound that followed cannot be described. It was the sound of creation and destruction happening in the same instant. A concentrated, apocalyptic blast of thunder and a web of blindingly bright lightning converged on a single point, the top of Tawaraya's head. The god of strength didn't even have time to cry out. The lightning pierced him, and the thunder shattered him. The immovable object was violently, definitively moved. He was thrown to the ground, his divine form flickering, his body scorched and broken. The storm of Fujin's wind was released, and it washed over his fallen form, a final insult. The assembled gods watched in silent horror. Tawaraya, one of their strongest, a being of legendary power, had been defeated. Not in a battle but in a casual, almost effortless display of force. The hope that had flickered in their hearts was extinguished. This wasn't a fight they could win with strength. The demonic brothers barely gave their fallen foe a second glance. Their rampage continued, their path of destruction now leading them inexorably toward the heart of Takamagara, toward the sunlit palace of the ruler of heaven herself, the great goddess Amaterasu Amakami. The chaos was no longer at the gates, it was at her door. The very order of the universe, the balance between light and dark, heaven and earth, now teetered on the brink, threatened by the joyful, malevolent symphony of a drum and a bag of wind. The gods had one last hope, a wild card, a chaotic force of their own, a god so violent and unpredictable They had banished him from heaven long ago. As the shadows of the two demons fell upon her golden palace, the sun goddess made a choice. To fight chaos, she would need to unleash a greater chaos. His name was Susanoo no Mikoto, the violent male god, the untamable storm, the raging sea, the brother of the sun and moon. He was the divine mistake, the black sheep of the primordial family, a deity so consumed by his own chaotic passions that the heavenly plane, the Takamagara, could not contain him. For his crimes, for desecrating his sister's sacred rice fields, for defiling her holy halls, for an act of cruelty so profound it drove the sun itself into hiding, he had been cast out. Shorn of his beard and claws like a common beast, he was exiled from the celestial realm, banished to the mortal lands below to wander in disgrace. And now Amaterasu, the very sister he had tormented, was calling him back. It was a choice born not of forgiveness, but of pure cold desperation. The other gods, the 800 myriad kami, were paragons of order, of creation, of harmony. They were builders, growers, nurturers. They understood balance. Raijin and Fujin understood only destruction. They were a cancer on the mortal world, and you do not negotiate with a cancer. You cut it out. And Susanoo was the sharpest blade in existence. The sun goddess sent her swiftest messenger, a ray of pure light that shot down from the heavens, piercing the clouds and striking the earth in the wild province of Izumo. There, among the tall reeds and churning rivers, the exiled god was living a life far from divine. He wasn't repenting. He was simply existing. A force of nature temporarily dormant. Some tales say he was slaying monsters, others that he was building a kingdom, and still others that he was simply drinking sake and lamenting his own boredom. But all tales agree on this. When the light of his sister found him, it found a god spoiling for a fight. The message wasn't a request. It was a pardon tied to a condition, a chance to return to the heavenly plane, a chance to wash away the stain of his exile. All he had to do was face two rampaging demons. Susanoo laughed. It was a sound like grinding stones and crashing waves. The other gods saw a national crisis. He saw a welcome distraction. Demons? He had faced down an 8-headed, 8-tailed serpent that was the size of a mountain range. Two upstart oni were hardly a reason to get out of bed. But a pardon, a chance to walk the golden halls of heaven again, to feel the celestial winds, to look the other gods in the eye not as an exile, but as a savior, that had his attention. His journey back to heaven was not a quiet one. The sky itself seemed to recoil as he ascended. The winds grew turbulent, the clouds darkened, not with Raijin's thunder, but with Susanoo's raw, untethered power. When he stepped once more onto the floating bridge of heaven, the other deities fell silent. Fear, thick and heavy, hung in the air. This was not the return of a prodigal son. It was the unchaining of a monster. He stood before Amaterasu's throne, not with the humility of a pardoned exile, but with the swagger of a warrior who knows his own value. He was taller than the other gods, his hair wild and black like a midnight storm, his eyes holding the cold fury of the deep ocean. His sister, radiant and serene, looked down at him. The silence between them stretched for an eternity, filled with the ghosts of past betrayals. "You have grown," she said, her voice like the calm before a typhoon. "I have grown bored," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "You did not call me here for pleasantries, sister. You have a pest problem." The other gods bristled at his insolence, but Amaterasu held up a hand. She knew her brother. Appealing to his honor would be pointless. Appealing to his duty, laughable. You don't ask a hurricane to be gentle. You simply point it in the right direction and pray for the aftermath. "They are destroying the central land of reed plains," she stated. "They mock our authority. They slaughter mortals for sport. They are chaos incarnate." Susanoo's lips curled into a predator's smile. "My kind of chaos," he mused. "So what is your offer? I deal with your little problem and my exile is ended. I am welcomed back, all is forgiven, and we sing songs around the campfire? I think not. What is it you want, brother?" Amaterasu asked, her voice dangerously soft. "I want what they have," Susanoo declared, his voice booming through the hall. "Freedom. The freedom to unleash my power without your endless rules and your tedious sense of order. I will face these demons, but I will do it my way. When I descend, I will not be a gentle rain. I will be a tsunami. I will be the earthquake that shakes the foundations of the world. And you and all these trembling gods will not interfere. You will let the storm rage until it is spent. That is my price." Amaterasu looked at the faces of her court, pale, terrified, but silent. They knew this was a devil's bargain. To save the world from one storm, they had to unleash another, potentially greater one. But they also saw the truth in her eyes. There was no other way. "You have your terms," she conceded, "but you will need more than just your rage. These are not common demons." "I am not a common god," Susanoo shot back. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the assembled deities. "But you are right. For a hunt like this, I'll need my old blade." He was talking about the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the grass-cutting sword, a weapon of impossible power, a blade so legendary it would one day become one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan. He hadn't forged it. He had found it. During his exile, he had come upon a family weeping, about to sacrifice their last daughter to a terrifying beast, the Yamata no Orochi, the 8-headed, 8-tailed serpent. Susanoo, seeing a challenge worthy of his strength, devised a plan. He had the family brew 8 giant vats of super-strong sake, and when the serpent came, each of its heads drank from a vat until it fell into a drunken stupor. Then Susanoo went to work. With his own 10-span sword, he hacked away at the beast, lopping off its heads and tails one by one, the rivers running red with its monstrous blood. As he sliced into the 4th tail, his blade struck something hard and shattered. Curious, he cut the tail open, and inside, nestled against the vertebrae, he found it. A magnificent sword, gleaming with a divine, otherworldly light. The Kusanagi, a blade born from the heart of a monster, now wielded by a god who was half monster himself. The sword had been taken from him upon his exile, stored away in the celestial armory. Now he walked there, the other gods parting before him like reeds in a river. He took the hilt of the Kusanagi, and as his fingers wrapped around it, the air itself crackled with energy. The sword was an extension of his own being, a tool of sublime, perfect destruction. Armed and unbound, Susanoo strode to the edge of the heavenly plain. He looked down through the swirling clouds at the mortal world below. He could feel them. He could feel the chaotic energy of Raijin's thunder, and the wild, untamed spirit of Fujin's wind. They were powerful. They were destructive. They were magnificent. And they were trespassing on his territory. For if there was one true, undisputed god of the storm in the Japanese pantheon, it was him. He grinned, a terrifying, exhilarating expression. This wouldn't just be a battle. It would be a conversation, spoken in a language of lightning, wind, and steel. The god of storms was about to meet the demons of thunder and wind, and the heavens themselves would hold their breath to see which tempest would be left standing. The answer came not with a word, but with a gale. Fujin, silent and grinning, exhaled, and the world bent to his will. The air around Susanoo thickened, turning from a gentle breeze into a crushing, invisible python. It squeezed the breath from the air itself, a vacuum that sought to collapse his lungs. Trees a mile away were ripped from their roots, not by a gust, but by the sudden, violent absence of pressure. This wasn't just wind. It was the weaponization of the sky, a silent, suffocating assault designed to disorient and disable before the true hammer fell. And then it fell. From the churning clouds above, Raijin descended like a meteorite wrapped in lightning. He didn't ride the storm. He was the storm. Each of his drums, struck with a blur of motion, was not a beat but a detonation. The first strike sent a spear of pure, white-hot energy lancing down, not at Susanoo, but at the ground before him, turning the earth to glass in a spiderweb of incandescent fury. The second strike was a concussive blast, a thunderclap so profound it was felt in the bones, a shockwave that shattered stone and shook the very foundations of the mountain. The third, fourth, and fifth strikes came in a blinding, deafening staccato, a cage of lightning and thunder meant to tear a god apart. Together, they were a perfect, horrifying engine of destruction. Fujin controlled the battlefield, his winds a constant, swirling vortex that kicked up dust and debris, obscuring vision and choking the senses. He created currents that would catch his brother's lightning and whip it around in unpredictable arcs, turning single bolts into a net of electrical death. Raijin was the executioner, the raw, untamable power that delivered the final cataclysmic blow. They had fought countless demons and spirits this way. It had never failed, but they had never fought a storm. Susanoo stood in the heart of their maelstrom, unmoving. The crushing vacuum of Fujin's wind broke against him like a wave on a cliff. The thunder that should have deafened him was merely a hum in his ears. The lightning that should have incinerated him fizzled and died a few feet from his skin, its ferocious energy absorbed into him, feeding him. He closed his eyes, a faint smile on his lips. He could feel it all. The raw primal chaos. The untamed fury. It was beautiful. It was nostalgic. Felt like home. He opened his eyes, and they blazed with the light of 1,000 storms. Is that all? His voice wasn't a shout. It was a rumble that resonated deeper than Raijin's thunder. A sound that came from the core of the world. With a single deliberate gesture, he reached out and grabbed the air itself. Fujin felt it instantly. His connection to the winds, his absolute dominion over the currents, was severed. It was as if another hand, infinitely stronger, had seized the reins. Susanoo clenched his fist, and the vortex collapsed inward. The winds that Fujin had summoned turned on him, a hurricane of his own making now battering his body, tearing at his sack of gales. For the first time, the wind demon felt the sting of a gale he could not command. Raijin, seeing his brother falter, roared in defiance and beat his drums in a frantic, furious rhythm. A storm of lightning bolts, dozens of them, rained down on Susanoo. This was not a cage. This was an annihilation. But Susanoo was already moving. He drew his legendary sword, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, the grass-cutting sword. The blade, pulled from the tail of the eight-headed serpent Orochi, hummed with its own ancient power. He didn't block the lightning. He didn't dodge it. He began to dance. With each bolt that descended, the Kusanagi blade would flash, meeting it in midair. But instead of deflecting, the sword seemed to catch the lightning, to drink it in. The steel glowed brighter and brighter, first white, then a brilliant celestial blue, humming with stolen power. Raijin beat his drums faster, his frustration mounting to a fever pitch, but every ounce of power he threw at Susanoo was simply taken. The god of storms was not fighting the lightning. He was conducting it. He was a master musician, and Raijin's thunder was merely his instrument. "You wield the thunder," Susanoo called out, his voice now laced with the very energy he had captured. "But I was born in it." With a final elegant sweep of the Kusanagi, he unleashed all of the stored energy in a single horizontal wave of azure light. It was not a bolt of lightning. It was a tsunami of it. The blast tore across the landscape, silent and absolute. It didn't just strike Raijin, it engulfed him. The thunder demon's own power, amplified and perfected, washed over him, silencing his drums and throwing him from the sky. He crashed to the earth, his body smoking, his demonic pride shattered. He had been struck down by his own storm. Susanoo then turned his attention to Fujin, who was still wrestling with his own rebellious winds. The god of storms simply raised a hand, and the air fell completely still. The silence was more terrifying than the hurricane had been. Every leaf, every speck of dust, hung motionless. The world was holding its breath. "You command the breeze," Susanoo said, taking a slow step forward. "But I am the empty space between the worlds. I am the sigh of the cosmos. Your wind is but a whisper in my gale." He inhaled deeply, and the very atmosphere for miles around began to rush towards him. Fujin felt himself being pulled, dragged through the air by a force he couldn't comprehend. It was the power of a black hole, the breath of a star. He clawed at the air, trying to find a current to resist, but there was nothing. There was only the pull. He was helpless, a leaf caught in the intake of a divine engine. He and his brother landed in a heap at Susanoo's feet. They were beaten, utterly and completely humbled. The raw, untamed forces of nature had been tamed by nature's god. Raijin struggled to lift his head, his eyes burning with a mixture of hatred and, for the first time, awe. Fujin simply lay there, feeling the suffocating stillness of an air he no longer controlled. Susanoo looked down at them, the Kusanagi sword resting on his shoulder, still faintly glowing. He could have ended them. He could have scattered their essence across the heavens, erasing the monstrous Oni who had terrorized the celestial bureaucracy. It would have been easy. It would have been just. But Susanoo had never been particularly interested in justice. He was interested in power, in potential, in things that were wild and broke the rules. And in these two broken creatures, he saw a reflection of his own chaotic, tempestuous soul. They were raw, they were undisciplined, but their power was undeniable. It was a power that, if aimed correctly, could shake the foundations of heaven and earth. It was a power he could use. "You fight like monsters," Susanoo said, his voice calm, the storm within him now quiet. "All fury, no purpose. You are a hammer without a hand to swing it, a wind without a direction to blow." He knelt, his gaze locking onto theirs. There was no malice in his eyes, only a terrifying clarity. "You have terrorized the gods. You have savaged the spirits. You have treated the heavens as your personal playground, and for that you should be obliterated. But I am offering you a choice. Continue to be a mindless disaster, a footnote in the history of chaos, and I will unmake you right here. Or you can become a proper storm, a storm with a purpose, a storm that serves. Swear your allegiance to me. Lend your thunder and your wind to my cause. Be more than just demons. Become gods." The air, thick with ozone and the scent of displaced earth, grew impossibly still. The Buddha's words hung between the two forces, a challenge so profound it silenced the very storm they embodied. Become gods. The concept was alien. Demons were defined by their opposition to the divine, their existence a rebellion against celestial order. To serve, to have a cause, to kneel, it was anathema. Raijin's knuckles whitened around his mallets. Every fiber of his being, a knot of pure chaotic energy, screamed to strike, to shatter this serene figure and the absurd proposition he offered, to answer words with thunder, to end this negotiation with a final definitive crash. He could feel the lightning coiling in his muscles, a wild power begging for release. To be unmade was one thing. It was an ending he could understand. But to be repurposed? It was the ultimate insult. Fujin, however, felt a different current stirring. His gaze wasn't fixed on the Buddha's calm face, but on the world around them. He saw the splintered trees, the gouged earth, the terror-stricken faces of the humans cowering in the distance. They had always done this. They raged, they destroyed, they moved on. It was their nature. But for the first time he felt the sheer, crushing pointlessness of it all. They were a force of nature, yes, but a blind one. A hurricane with no destination. A wildfire with no purpose but to consume. The Buddha's offer, as insulting as it was, contained a kernel of something he had never considered. Meaning. What if their power wasn't just for breaking things? What if the wind could be more than a weapon? What if it could be a tool? A shield? A voice? He glanced at his brother, saw the murderous rage building in his eyes, and knew this was the moment that would define eternity for them. Raijin took a step forward, the ground cracking under his foot. The air began to hum, the prelude to a strike that would level the entire mountain. But before he could unleash his fury, Fujin's hand shot out, gripping his brother's arm. It wasn't a gesture of restraint, it was a plea. Raijin turned, his eyes blazing with confusion and betrayal. Fujin simply shook his head, his own eyes reflecting a universe of conflict. For 1,000 years they had been one entity, a single storm in two bodies. But now, for the first time, their paths were diverging. One saw only a cage, the other a throne. The Buddha watched, his expression unchanging. He had not offered a choice between freedom and servitude. He had offered a choice between oblivion and purpose. He had seen the nascent flicker of understanding in Fujin, the raging pride in Raijin. He knew this was the critical moment. He let the silence stretch, allowing their own natures to war within them. Finally, Fujin spoke, his voice a low rumble like a distant gale. "What cause?" Raijin recoiled as if struck. The question itself was a concession, a crack in the dam of their demonic pride. The Buddha's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. "The cause of balance," he said, his voice resonating not in their ears, but in the very core of their beings. "You are chaos. You are destruction. This is true. But chaos without order is just noise. Destruction without creation is just an ending. The universe requires both. I do not ask you to stop being the storm. I ask you to become the storm that washes away pestilence to allow for new growth. The storm that drives away evil spirits. The storm that reminds mortals of the power that exists beyond their small lives. A power that can be both feared and revered." He extended a hand, palm open. "You have spent eons as a terror. I offer you the chance to become a symbol, a guardian. Your thunder will not be a mindless tantrum, Raijin. It will be the drumbeat of justice, the sound that makes demons tremble. Your wind will not be a capricious whirlwind, Fujin. It will be the breath of the world, cleansing the impure, and carrying the prayers of the faithful to the heavens. You will not serve me. You will serve the Dharma. You will serve the fundamental truth of existence. You will stand as sentinels at the gates of enlightenment. The proposition was staggering. It was a reforging of their very identity. Raijin looked at his drums, the ring of taiko that had been his voice for millennia. He had only ever known how to play one song. The song of destruction. Could he learn another? He looked at Fujin, who was holding his bag of winds, the source of his immeasurable power. Could that power, which had torn fleets apart and leveled cities, truly be used to protect? The idea was so radical it was terrifying. More terrifying than oblivion. Slowly, hesitantly, Fujin took a step forward. He knelt. Not in submission but in acceptance. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. It felt like a betrayal of his own nature. Yet it also felt right. A profound sense of purpose, a weight he had never known he lacked, began to settle upon him. He felt the wild, chaotic winds within his bag begin to calm, to swirl with a new, focused intent. Raijin watched, his heart a maelstrom of rage, confusion, and a strange, unwelcome flicker of envy. To be left alone in chaos suddenly seemed like the loneliest fate in the universe. With a roar that was part agony and part surrender, he slammed the butts of his drumsticks into the earth and knelt beside his brother. The moment they both knelt, the world changed. A light, pure and golden, erupted from the Buddha, washing over them. It was not a searing, painful light, but a warm, transformative radiance. It plunged into their demonic forms, not to burn away their essence but to temper it. Like raw iron being plunged into the forge, they were heated, hammered, and cooled into something new, something stronger. Their monstrous features sharpened, taking on a fierce, divine nobility. The jagged, chaotic energy that surrounded them coalesced, becoming a focused and formidable aura. Raijin's skin took on the burnished hue of a thunderhead at sunset, his muscles crackling with controlled lightning. Fujin's form seemed to become less solid, flowing like the air itself, his green skin the color of a storm-tossed sea. They were still fearsome. They were still the storm. But now there was a mind behind the hurricane, a will behind the lightning. When the light receded, they rose. They felt different. The insatiable hunger for destruction was gone, replaced by a potent, protective instinct. They were still immensely powerful, more so than before, but the power now answered to a purpose. The Buddha smiled. Arise, Raijin. Arise, Fujin. You are no longer Oni. You are Tenbu, protectors of the celestial realm, and your first duty awaits. He gestured not towards the heavens, but towards the mortal realm below. In the land of the rising sun, a monument is being built. A temple to house 1,001 images of my incarnation of mercy, Kennin. It will be a beacon of hope, a sanctuary for the weary, a place of immense spiritual power. Such a place will inevitably draw the attention of those who feast on despair and darkness. Your old brethren. The new gods looked at each other. Their first task was to fight the very beings they once were. The temple is called Sanju Sanjendo, the Buddha continued. You will stand guard at its gates. You will be the first line of defense between the sacred and the profane. Let your thunder and wind be the wall against which all evil breaks. This is your new purpose. This is your first test. And just as he spoke, a shadow fell over the land. From the dark places of the world, the foulest of demons, drawn by the temple's nascent holy energy, began to stir. They were a horde of twisted forms and malevolent spirits, the very essence of the chaos Raijin and Fujin had just forsaken. They saw the two new gods standing at the foot of the mountain and sneered, smelling the lingering traces of their demonic past, mistaking it for a sign of weakness. The leader, a massive tusked demon of immense power, pointed a clawed finger. Brothers, you have abandoned the true path for a gilded cage. Join us. We will tear down this beacon of light and feast on its ashes together. Raijin looked at Fujin. A slow, terrible grin spread across his face. It was the same grin he always wore before a battle, but this time it was different. It wasn't fueled by mindless rage, but by righteous fury. He lifted his mallets and for the first time, felt the hum of divine power flowing through them. Fujin cinched his bag of winds, feeling not a wild gale, but a focused, controlled typhoon waiting for his command. They had been given a new song to play, and it was time for their old friends to hear it. The heavens did not see them coming. Not at first. Down below on the middle plane, humanity felt it as a strange shift in the air. A sudden oppressive humidity that made the stones sweat. A wind that didn't blow from any direction, but seemed to rise from the very soil, carrying the scent of deep earth and ozone. Fishermen saw the sea pull back from the shore, not in fear, but as if taking a deep, expectant breath. Farmers watched their fields of rice stand preternaturally still, every stalk a silent green needle pointing towards a sky that was rapidly turning the color of a fresh bruise. This was no ordinary storm. This was an ascent. Fujin opened his bag, not to release a gale, but to create a pillar of wind, a spiraling staircase of pure kinetic force that reached from the mortal world to the very gates of Takamagara. And upon this churning, roaring road of air they rose. Raijin, his drums silent for now, was a coiled spring of lightning, every muscle crackling with contained energy. They were a storm climbing back into the sky that had birthed it. The gods of the high heavenly plane felt their arrival as a tremor in the very foundations of their perfect world. It was a pressure drop that made their ears pop, a flicker in the eternal golden light of their home. The sake in their cups rippled. The music of their kotos and flutes faltered, a sour note hanging in the suddenly heavy air. Then came the sound, a low guttural rumble that wasn't thunder, but the promise of it. It was the sound of a predator clearing its throat. They burst through the Aimno Awato, the heavenly rock gate, not with a crash, but with a terrifying silence. The swirling pillar of wind dissipated behind them, leaving only two figures standing where an army should have been. The assembled kami, the very ones who had cast them out, turned as one. They saw the same monstrous forms, the same horns and claws, but the light in their eyes was different. The wild, chaotic rage was gone. In its place was a focus as sharp and as cold as a shard of winter ice. One of the lesser gods, a pompous deity of courtly manners, stepped forward, his silken robes rustling. He sneered. "The demons have returned. Did you miss our celestial wine so much that you crawled back from the filth to beg for a taste?" A murmur of cruel laughter rippled through the divine court. Fujin looked at Raijin, a silent communication passing between them. The old Fujin would have roared, would have unleashed a hurricane of fury at the insult. But this Fujin simply smiled, a slow, chilling expression that did not reach his eyes. He lifted his bag of winds, holding it gently, as if it were a newborn child. Raijin spoke, and his voice was not the shout of a beast, but the low, resonant hum of a coming earthquake. "We did not come for your wine," he said, his gaze sweeping across the sea of divine faces, each one a portrait of arrogance and contempt. "We did not come to beg. We came to remind you of the music you have forgotten." He lifted one of his mallets. It seemed to move with impossible slowness, yet it blurred through the air. He struck the smallest of his drums, a single sharp tap. Tap. It was not a deafening boom. It was a precise, piercing crack, like the world's largest whip snapping. From the point of impact, a bolt of pure white lightning, no thicker than a spear shaft, erupted. It didn't strike the sneering god. It struck the ornate, jewel-encrusted pillar behind him. There was no explosion. The pillar simply ceased to exist. It was not shattered. It was unwritten from creation, leaving behind only a trail of vapor and the smell of burnt reality. The laughter died in a collective gasp. Every god in that court, from the most minor functionary to the most powerful minister, took an involuntary step back. They had seen Raijin's lightning before. It was a wild, untamed thing, a force of nature. This was the work of an artist, a terrifying, meticulous artist of destruction. "That," Raijin rumbled, his voice now carrying the weight of the coming storm, "was the first note." And then Fujin played his part. He opened his bag, and what came out was not a tempest. It was 1,000 individual currents of air, each one moving with the speed and precision of a striking snake. They didn't flatten the divine court. They dismantled it. The winds coiled around spears and swords, yanking them from the hands of divine warriors and sending them clattering to the floor. They billowed under the fine silk robes of the courtiers, tying them in knots, sending the proud gods tumbling like children. They swirled into the air, forming a vortex that snatched the canopies and banners, shredding them into confetti that rained down on the chaos. It was a symphony of humiliation, a targeted gale that attacked their pride, not their bodies. The gods who had once laughed now scrambled, their dignity stripped away by an invisible hand. this was not the mindless Oni they had banished. This was something far, far worse. You sit here. Fujin's voice was a whisper that carried on the winds he commanded, reaching every corner of the court. You sit here in your perfect halls, debating points of etiquette and writing poems to the flawless symmetry of a cherry blossom. You have forgotten the howl of the wind that shapes the mountains. You have forgotten the fury of the lightning that splits the oldest trees and fertilizes the soil. Raijin took a step forward, his claws clicking on the polished floor. The gods flinched. You call yourselves divine, he growled. But you have forgotten the parts of divinity that are ugly, that are loud, that are necessary. You have forgotten the storm. He raised both mallets. Fujin braced himself, clutching his bag. They were a single entity now, a perfect self-contained storm system. The other kami finally drew their own power, their forms beginning to glow with divine light. A warrior god, clad in celestial armor, raised a flaming sword. You are aberrations. Monsters. Takamagara will purge you. Raijin looked at him, his eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound pity. You think the storm is the aberration, he said softly. But the storm is the honesty of the world. Calm is the exception. And then he began to play. It was not a random drumming. It was a rhythm, a primal terrifying beat that resonated in the very bones of the gods who stood against them. With every beat, lightning answered. Not wild forks, but focused lances of energy. One beat, and a shield wall of divine energy shattered into a million glittering shards. Another beat, and the ground cracked, sending fissures racing towards the divine army. A third beat, a deep resonant boom from his largest drum, and a wave of pure concussive force rolled outwards, sending dozens of gods flying backwards, their perfect armor dented, their divine ears ringing with the thunder of true creation. Fujin danced through the chaos, a whirlwind of motion. His winds were Raijin's partner. Where Raijin's lightning shattered a formation, Fujin's winds would scatter the survivors, sowing confusion and terror. Where a god would try to launch a counterattack, a sudden focused gust of wind would throw off their aim, sending a bolt of divine fire harmlessly into the sky. They were two parts of a single song, the percussion and the breath, the strike and the follow-through. They were not killing. That was the most terrifying part. They could have. A single bolt like the one that had erased the pillar could have ended any one of them. But this was not about extermination. It was a lesson. It was a performance. They were systematically, brutally, and artistically taking apart the divine host, breaking their weapons, shattering their formations, and unraveling their pride, all without spilling a single drop of divine blood. They were showing the gods of the high plane that the forces they had dismissed as crude and monstrous were, in fact, capable of a control and power they couldn't possibly comprehend. As the divine army faltered, their confidence broken, a new figure stepped from the back of the court. It was not a warrior. It was Omoikane, the god of wisdom and intelligence, his face a mask of calm calculation. He had watched the entire exchange not with fear, but with intense analytical focus. He held up a single hand, and the very air seemed to grow still, the ambient chaos momentarily held at bay by his sheer intellectual presence. He looked past the chaos, past the cowering gods, and straight at Raijin and Fujin. His voice was quiet, yet it cut through the lingering thunder. A beautiful, if brutish, display of newfound power, he said, his eyes gleaming with an unnerving light. You have learned a new song. But you forget, demons, we are the ones who wrote the original score. He smiled, a thin, bloodless expression. And we know all the ways it can be unmade. And with that, the very air in the celestial plane began to vibrate. It wasn't a sound Raijin could strike with his drumsticks, nor a wind Fujin could command from his sack. It was a deeper frequency, a subsonic hum that resonated not in the ears, but in the bones, in the very marrow of existence. The demon didn't move. He simply opened his mouth, and a single discordant note slithered into the world. It was the sound of a string snapping on a perfectly tuned instrument, the sound of a gear grinding to a halt. Raijin, poised to strike, felt his power curdle. He slammed his mallet onto the nearest drum, expecting a cataclysmic roar of thunder, a spear of pure divine lightning. Instead, the sound that emerged was a wet, sickening thud. The lightning that arced from the drum was not brilliant white or electric blue, but a diseased, oily black. It didn't lash out at their enemy. It coiled back like a serpent striking its own tail, and wrapped around Raijin's arm. He cried out, not in pain but in sheer soul-crushing shock. The lightning wasn't burning him. It was draining him. The divine energy, the very essence of the storm, was being siphoned out of him, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache. He looked at his brother. Fujin was wrestling with his sack of winds, his knuckles white. He had opened its mouth to unleash a hurricane, a gale that could strip mountains bare. But nothing came out. No, that wasn't right. Something was coming out. A profound and terrifying silence. A vacuum. The air around Fujin grew thin, shimmering with an absence that pulled and tore at the fabric of reality. The wind, his oldest friend and most trusted weapon, had become a void. It wasn't blowing, it was consuming. The sack, once billowing with the breath of the world, now looked like a puncture in the universe, greedily drinking the light and sound around it. You see, the demon's voice was now the only sound, a calm, cutting whisper in the suffocating stillness. You learned to play the melody of the storm. A beautiful melody, I admit, full of fury and passion, but it is just one arrangement. The energy you command, the power you call divine, where do you think it comes from? It is the raw chaos of Yomi, the primordial energy of the underworld, filtered and refined through your celestial instruments. You are playing a symphony on a single string, convinced you understand music. He took a step forward, the ground beneath his feet turning brittle and gray. We demons, we were born in the orchestra pit. We know every instrument. We know the screech of nails on stone, the shriek of a dying star, the deafening silence between heartbeats. We know the dissonant chords that hold the universe together, and the ones that can tear it all apart. Your power is a carefully constructed harmony, and I just introduced a note of pure entropy. Raijin fell to one knee, his drumsticks clattering to the ground. The black lightning had crawled up his arm to his shoulder, its tendrils weaving into his very being, turning his divine form translucent, ghostly. He could feel his immortality fraying at the edges. Fujin collapsed moments later, gasping for air that wasn't there, his own power suffocating him, crushing him under the weight of an absolute nothingness. Their storm, the magnificent, world-shaking tempest they had summoned, was gone. The sky was clear, but it was a dead, empty clarity. The stars didn't twinkle. They stared, cold and indifferent. The demon stood over them, a silhouette against the silent, dying heavens. You thought you were the storm, he hissed, his voice laced with an ancient contempt. You are merely its echo, a pale imitation of a much greater, much more terrible truth. The truth is that creation is a fleeting accident. The natural state of all things is not order but chaos, not sound but silence, not life but the endless patient void. We are not here to conquer your world. We are here to correct it, to return it to its original score. He raised a hand, and from his palm, a sphere of that same crushing emptiness began to form. It was a hole in the world, a sphere of anti-existence that promised not a quick death, but an utter and complete erasure. Your song is over, little gods. It is time for the final rest. The sphere grew, pulling at the light, pulling at their fading energy. This was it, the end. Defeat not by a superior force but by a superior understanding. They had been outmaneuvered on a cosmic scale, their own power turned into the instrument of their unmaking. But then in the abyss of his fading consciousness, Raijin felt something. Not a surge of power, not a secret technique. It was a memory, a feeling. He remembered the moment of his birth, emerging from the decay of his mother Izanami. He was born of death, born of sorrow. His thunder was not just the sound of a drum. It was the echo of a primal scream of loss that had birthed a universe. It was the first sound, the great noise that pushed back against the encroaching silence of non-existence. He looked at Fujin, who was struggling, his eyes wide with the same dawning horror and recognition. Fujin's wind wasn't just moving air. It was the first breath, the sigh of a world coming into being, the exhale of a creator god, the force that carried the seeds of life and blew away the dust of oblivion. They had been fighting as musicians. They had been trying to play their song louder than the demons. But that was their mistake. The demon was right. He knew the song better than they did. He could unmake the melody, but they weren't the melody. They were the instruments. Their power didn't come from the drums or the sack. The drums and the sack were just tools they used to shape the power that they were. The demon could corrupt the tools, could silence the song, but could he break the instrument itself? Could he silence the primal scream? Could he steal the first breath? A new understanding passed between the brothers in that silent, desperate moment. A terrifying, reckless, and perhaps final idea. Their enemy was using the fundamental rules of their power against them, so they would have to break the rules. All of them. It was the ultimate gamble. To abandon the tools, to abandon the song, and to unleash the raw, untamed, unfiltered chaos of their own nature. It would be an act of pure creation and pure destruction all at once. It might save the heavens. It might shatter them into irreparable dust. It might erase the demon. It might erase them along with him. Slowly, with the last of his strength, Raijin let go of his blackened, useless drumsticks. Across from him, Fujin, with a final shuddering gasp, released his grip on the sack of winds, letting the terrifying void within it consume itself and vanish. They were disarmed, powerless, and for the first time they were truly free. They looked at each other, and then at the encroaching sphere of nothingness. They had one last sound to make, one final storm to unleash, not from their hands but from their souls. They met in the middle of the sky, two brothers against the end of all things. The void pulsed, a wound in reality, hungry for light, for sound, for memory. But Raijin and Fujin had none of their old power to give it. The drums were silent. The bag of winds was empty. All that was left was them, the raw, untamed essence of what they had always been, stripped of their divine tools, their godly rage. And in that silence they found a different kind of power. A power they had never known they possessed because they had always been too busy fighting to listen. It was the power of choice, the power of purpose. Raijin, the demon of thunder, looked at his brother. He saw not a rival but a reflection, the wild, untamable force that gave his thunder purpose. Without the wind to carry the sound, what was a thunderclap but a brief, meaningless noise? Fujin, the master of gales, looked back. He saw the anchor to his chaos. What was wind without the thunder to announce its arrival, without the lightning to illuminate its path? It was just empty movement, a ghost in the air. They were a paradox, two forces that could only exist in opposition, yet were incomplete without each other. Their entire existence had been a cosmic argument, a celestial rivalry that shook the heavens and terrified the earth. But it was that very argument, that constant push and pull, that kept the world in motion. They were the engine of change, the violent, beautiful, terrifying engine of life itself. A storm isn't just destruction. It's the clearing of the old to make way for the new. It's the rain that nourishes the earth after the fire. The void didn't understand this. It was an absence. It was the end of all arguments, the final crushing silence. And so Raijin and Fujin made their choice. They would give the void the one thing it could not comprehend. They would give it a story. They reached for each other, not with fists but with open hands. And as their palms touched, the final storm began. It was not a storm of rain and lightning. It was a storm of memory. From Raijin burst forth the memory of the first sound, the crack of the world's egg, the first heartbeat of a star, the roar of a volcano giving birth to a new land. Every shout of defiance, every cry of joy, every song sung around a fire, every whisper of love in the dark, it all poured out of him, a tidal wave of sound, not as a weapon but as a statement. A declaration that to exist is to make a noise, to leave an echo in the halls of time. From Fujin erupted the memory of the first movement, the swirl of primordial dust forming galaxies, the first breath of a newborn creature, the rustle of leaves in a forest that had just learned its name. Every journey taken, every dance, every leap of faith, every restless thought that drove a mind to discovery, it all unspooled from him, a gale of pure momentum, a testament that to live is to move, to change, to never be the same from one moment to the next. The void recoiled. It was designed to consume energy, to erase matter. But this was different. This was meaning. This was narrative. You cannot erase a story once it has been told. Raijin and Fujin pushed deeper, their forms beginning to blur, to unravel. They were no longer gods. They were becoming the very concepts they had once wielded. Raijin became the idea of thunder, the sudden brilliant flash of inspiration, the heart-stopping moment of truth, the courage to speak when silence is easier. Fujin became the idea of wind, the relentless spirit of change, the whisper of curiosity that leads to new horizons, the unseen force that topples old empires and plants the seeds of new ones. the demon and the trickster, the hammer and the whisper. For the first time, they were not two forces in opposition, but two halves of a single truth, that creation is a chaotic, noisy, and beautiful storm. They didn't fight the nothingness. You cannot punch a hole. You cannot wrestle with an absence. Instead, they chose to fill it. They poured their very being, their history, their rivalry, their newfound brotherhood into the gaping maw of the void. They became the ultimate sacrifice. They became the story that was so vast, so complex, so full of sound and motion, that there was no room left for nothing. The sphere of anti-existence began to change. The absolute black was streaked with the silver of lightning, the pale green of the wind. The crushing silence was broken by a low hum, which grew into a roar, then a rumble, then a song. The void was not destroyed. It was transformed. It became a new sky, a canvas for future storms, a space for new stories to be written. And Raijin and Fujin? They were gone, but they were also everywhere. They were no longer two Oni-like figures brawling on the clouds. They had become the fabric of the world itself. Their final act had woven them into the very essence of existence. And so the age of gods ended, and the age of stories began. Every time a storm gathers on the horizon, that is Raijin's memory stirring. Every clap of thunder is not a weapon, but an echo of his final defiant roar against silence. It's a reminder that your voice matters, that to make a sound is to prove you are alive. The flash of lightning is his spirit, a brief, brilliant moment of clarity in the darkness, a spark of an idea that can change everything. And every time the wind howls through the trees or whispers through a quiet street, that is Fujin's legacy. It is the breath of life, the relentless push of progress, the gentle nudge that tells you it's time to move on, to change, to grow. The unseen force that shapes the world is not his anger anymore, but his final loving act of creation. Their story is not just a myth from ancient Japan. It is a fundamental truth of the human condition. We all have a Raijin and a Fujin within us. We have the capacity for loud, thunderous passion, for righteous anger, for the power to make our presence known. And we have the capacity for quiet, persistent change, for curiosity, for the gentle influence that can reshape landscapes over time. For too long, we see them as rivals inside ourselves. The part of us that wants to shout versus the part that wants to move in silence. The part that wants to tear down the old versus the part that wants to build the new. We think we have to choose one, to be the thunder or to be the wind. But the final lesson of Raijin and Fujin is the one they learned at the end of all things. They are not enemies. They are partners. True power, true creation is not in choosing one over the other, but in finding the balance between them. It's in knowing when to be the thunder and when to be the wind. Their story is a testament that even the most destructive forces can become the source of the greatest creation, that the fiercest rivalries can hide the deepest bonds, and that the most important storm you will ever face is the one inside your own soul. The choice is yours, to let it be a storm of mindless destruction, a war against yourself, or to do what the gods of thunder and wind did in their final moments. Unite the opposing forces within you and unleash a storm of creation, a storm of purpose, a storm of meaning. They are not gone. You just have to know how to listen. Step outside when the sky grows dark. Feel the air grow still and heavy. That's the moment. The pause between the wind and the thunder. In that sacred silence, you can feel them. Two brothers, two rivals, two halves of a single soul, forever bound together in the sky, reminding us that even after the loudest noise and the strongest gale, there is peace, there is new life, and there is always, always a new story waiting to be told.